In this lesson, we're going to create a transition from our graph to the next part of our statement, which is going to be that but statement. Okay, so if you heard what he said earlier, he says how much life actually lives in the coral reefs. That's what he's talking about here with this graph. And then he says a but statement. So our tone kind of changes here. And we start to learn maybe some of the more sad facts about what's going on with coral reefs. So we want to have a change in tone here. So what I'm going to do is switch over to text for this part of the animation, just to maybe make it a little bit more impactful. So I'm going to hit the period key just so you can hear kind of what's coming up next in the script.
But humans and our activities are actually the largest threat to the existence of coral.
So to animate in that but statement, we need to get rid of this so we can bring but onto the screen. Now, to get rid of all of these, I think it would be nice just to scale them down really quickly, just as if it was just sucked right into the middle. So let's go ahead. We'll select everything with our pie graph and our legend. Let's go ahead and pre-compose that. So we'll hit Control-Shift-C, and we'll call this pie graph with legend. Say OK. And let's move back to before that pie graph even ever is animated on, which is going to be pretty far back because it still contains that information all the way back here. And we'll just trim that layer just to make it a little bit easier to manage. So we'll hit Alt, open bracket. And let's come forward and figure out where this is about to go away. So we'll Control Scrub to listen to it.
The reefs. But.
Okay, so right as he says but right in here, this is when it needs to go away.
But. Reefs.
So right as he finishes saying reefs, this is when it needs to scale down. So let's go ahead, turn on motion blur. We'll hit the S key for this. Give it a starting keyframe. We'll just give it, let's say, 10 frames to get out of the picture. We'll take it down to 0, and then we can trim this layer so it ends here. So hit Alt, end bracket to trim that. And I would like to do an extreme ease out to get this out of the picture. So let's hit that keyframe assistant easy ease. We'll go up to our graph editor and pull out that handle. So it's really going to slowly ease out and then zip in there at the very end. And I want to fix the cropping that we're getting around the edge of this comp. So let's go ahead and turn on our collapse transformations. So now we can see that edge, but we lost our motion blur on the inside. So let's go into this comp and turn on motion blur there. Okay, so now that's fixed. We're just going to zoom down in there. And then I want the word but to pop up. Let's see exactly where we want this to come on. So right about here is when we want to see that. So let's go ahead and just type out the word but. I'm just going to put it right here in the middle. And I'm going to do all caps. So we'll just bring that on. Let's do our PFDIN for this text. So it's all caps. Let's make it really bold, extra black. And we'll change that color. Anytime you are dealing with a but statement like that and you have to choose a color, if you have to choose between a color that leans more towards green or red, I usually like to choose red because it kind of signals that something is changing. So anything negative, like a stop, just feels like it goes more with a red color. So I'm going to choose that red. If we were saying and, I'd probably choose the green. So just kind of a little bit of psychology behind that. Most people would never even notice the difference, but I really feel like it's a little more thoughtful to do it that way. Let's make this larger. We'll place that right in the middle. Now let's bring up our scale for this word. And I want to use the same sort of animation for this word as we used for our pie graph, but I just want it to be doing the opposite thing. So first of all, I want it to scale up directly from the center. So let's move our anchor point. Just select that, put that right in the middle. And with this layer selected, let's hit the S key to bring that up. That's at 100% right now. So we'll go ahead and bring that on. And let's move backwards 10 frames from this key. So I'll hit Shift Page Up to move backwards 10 frames. And then we'll just hit the 0 key to bring that all the way down to 0. Let's scrub this just to see what it looks like. Now if you're having trouble scrubbing, if maybe it's slowing down, you might turn off motion blur. I'll just do a RAM preview. That might help just a little bit, just to cache some of those frames out. Hit the B key to trim that work area. That looks like that's moving faster than it wants to let me scrub right now. Okay, let's watch that through.
But
Okay, so this is looking pretty good. The only thing I'd like to change is I think it'd look better for this butt layer to be behind the pie graph. So let's move that backwards. And you can see that overlap just looks a little bit better that way. Let's trim this layer so that it doesn't begin until its first key. So select your layer, hit Alt open bracket. And I want to ease into this animation so that it gets really slow here at the end. So we'll go ahead and hit our graph editor and just choose that convert to auto Bezier, and then you can pull that out and it'll change it again. Let's watch this through to see what that looks like, how slow it comes in here. In fact, let's also add motion blur to that just so we can see the motion instead of having the butt just kind of pop as it gets larger.
But humans in our
I think this is a little bit big, kind of early, so I'd like to grab my selection tool and we'll just pull that forward. So we can just see how small that is earlier on.
But humans in our
that looks much better.
But
okay, so right about here is when I want to transition to the next part of the text talking about humans. So I need to get rid of the but again. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. We'll just set another keyframe here, move forward 10 frames, and copy that first keyframe here. So we'll hit Control C, Control V. And let's take a look at what the graph editor looks like for this key so it can ease back out. We'll just pull that right there. So that's going to really slowly ease back out of that.
But humans in our
so it almost looks like it was thrown up in the air, loses momentum, and then falls back down to earth. Really, really nice. Okay, so let's just watch our animation all the way through with a quick little RAM preview, just kind of starting back here. And then you can just see the whole thing.
The reefs. But humans in our
Great. Now, one of the things I'm noticing is that those swatches are disappearing, so it's causing a little bit of a pop. Now, those aren't going to be in the final animation, but I need them for the rest of the time just so we can color pick from them. So I'm going to unlock them really quickly. And let's just extend those to our whole duration of our comp. So we'll have those whenever we need them up there in the top. Okay, so that looks great. And I'm ready now to start animating the rest of that statement where he starts talking about humans and their activities. So we're going to do that with a 3D camera in our next lesson.